In this video, the learning target we're going to look at is I can find the max/min of a function using my graphing calculator. Now, I've just jotted down some notes here, so you might want to pause the video and copy down these notes. But essentially, there's 4 steps to being able to find the max or min of a function using your graphing calculator. Okay, so looking at example 1 here, I'm given the equation y equals x to the third plus 3x squared minus x minus 3. I want to make a rough sketch of the function and then find the max or mins of the function. So to do this, step 1, we need to get this equation into our graphing calculators. So we're going to go to y equals and we're going to plug in the equation. So what that looks like on your calculator, okay, so if you have a TI-83 or a TI-84, you'll notice that up in the top left-hand corner, there's a y equals button. So if you go ahead and click on that, okay, it'll have a list of y equals, and you can plug in different equations here. And you want to make sure that none of your plots are turned on, so none of those should be highlighted. If they are highlighted, okay, so for example, notice that one is now highlighted, you can just move the cursor on top of it, hit enter, and it'll unhighlight it. Okay, so you want to make sure this is all cleared out before you begin. Now, once it's cleared out, we want to get, like I said, our equation into the y equals. We want to plug this equation in. So to do that, you'll find the variables next to the alpha button. So right across from the alpha, it'll say x, t, and so forth. That button is your variable button. So if you click that, okay, you'll notice it puts an x on my screen. And then I want it to say x to the third. So on my calculator, there's this little arrow underneath the clear. It's called a caret. If you click that caret, okay, in some calculators it'll move you up, other calculators it'll just put a caret there, and then you can put a 3 after it. That stands for x to the third. Now, if your calculator moved you up, you might have to cursor to the right to drop the cursor back down for the next part, but mine automatically drops down. And then I'm going to add 3x squared. So adding 3x caret squared. Okay, so every time I put an exponent, I need that caret in there. And then I'm going to subtract x, and I'm going to minus 3. Okay, so my calculator now has the equation typed in. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is we now need to graph it on our calculators, and we just need to know that we might need to adjust the windows. But we're going to graph it first, and then we'll adjust the windows if we need to. So on my calculator, I'm going to click graph. And you'll notice I can see the graph of my function. Okay, it goes up, it comes back down, and then it goes back up. Now, we want to find the maximum and minimums within this graph. So essentially what that means is we want to find the top of the hill and the bottom of the valley. The top of the hill is going to be the maximum. Okay, so this point right here will be the max, and then the point at the bottom of the valley will be the local minimum we want to find there. Okay. So to do this, we're now on to step 3. Okay, so step 3 says you're going to click second trace and then use the minimum or maximum depending on which one you want to find. Okay, now on your calculator, what that means, you'll notice right above trace it says calc. Okay, in yellow here on my calculator. So you want to click second and then trace, because that'll take you into that calculation that we want to do. So if you click second trace, it'll bring you to this list, and you'll notice the third one says minimum and the fourth one says maximum. Okay, so let's say we want to find the maximum first. So I'm going to click enter on maximum. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to make a quick sketch of this graph. So the graph off to the side here, it looks something like this. It goes up, it comes down, and it goes back up. And when we're finding the maximum, we're looking for this point right here. Okay, so this would be the max that we're looking for. Okay, so we've gone to second trace, and we're now going to try and find this point. You'll notice down in the left-hand corner it says left bound. So what you do is you move this little blinking cursor, and you move it over top of the maximum that you want. So scrolling to the left, I'm going to move that cursor that's blinking at me so it's over top. Now, when it says left bound, what that means is I want to go to the left of that point. So I'm just going to click to the left. Doesn't matter how far, just a little bit to the left. Click enter. Okay, when you do that, you'll notice either a line or a little arrow has now appeared on top of your calculator pointing in. Okay, that's the left boundary. Then it says right boundary question mark. So once again, we're going to move back to the top where our point is. Now we're just going to go to the right of it. So I go to the right, click enter, and you'll notice that now puts an arrow on the right boundary pointing in. What that's doing is it's telling the calculator that the maximum value that it's going to look for has to fall between those two arrows. Okay, so that's what these little arrows mean. Then the calculator says, give it your best guess. So now we just move to where we think the max is going to be, and we click enter. The calculator thinks for a second, and then it'll tell you the maximum is at this point, and we want the y coordinate. Okay, that's the maximum value. And it says 3.08 if we round it, so we would say the max is at 3.08. Okay, now really it's the same steps to find the minimum. So if we go ahead and try and find this minimum at the bottom, it's the same steps, but we just change which function we're using. So once again, we're going to click second in yellow, and we're going to click trace. It takes us to this screen. This time we're going to use number 3 because we want to find a minimum. We don't want to find a maximum, we want to find the minimum. So we're going to click enter on that. And then it takes us through the same process. It's going to say left bound. So we're going to go to where the minimum is, and we're just going to move left of it. We're going to click enter, and once again, you'll notice it puts a little arrow there. It then says right bound, so we go to the right side of the point that we're trying to find, and it puts an arrow there. Once again, that's just telling the calculator that the minimum value has to be between those two arrows, and then we give the calculator the best guess that we can. And it'll think for a second, and then it'll say the minimum is at negative 3.08. So the minimum here is negative 3.08. Okay. All right. Let's look at one more example of doing this. So in example 2 here, it says y equals negative x to the third plus 3x squared plus 9x plus 1. We need to get that into our calculator. So remember, we're going to go to y equals, and we're going to plug in the equation. So if I do that here, okay, looking at my calculator, I'm going to click back on the y equals. I want to clear out the equation I just had, and I now want to type this one in. Now, one thing about this equation is you'll notice the first term's negative, okay? You want to make sure that you don't use the subtraction sign, okay? Don't use this. You want to use the negative at the bottom of your calculator. So click negative, and then we want x to the third. So type in x caret 3, and then we're adding 3x squared, and then we're adding 9x, and we're adding 1. Okay, so step 1, y equals, plug the equation in. Step 2 then is go ahead and graph it. So you're going to click on graph, and you'll notice as you watch that line graph, you saw that it ran off the screen, right? The top here gets cut off. That tells us then that we need to make an adjustment to our windows. And because it's getting cut off at the top of the graph, that means we want to see more of the top. That means we need to extend our y's. So when we click window here, we don't care about the x min or x max right now, but we do care about the y max, right? Because it was running off the top of our graph. So maybe I make that 35. Okay, I'm just going to make it bigger, hoping that I can see the top of my graph. Then I'm going to regraph it. And now you can see that we can see the top of our graph, which is what we wanted. Okay, so we have our graph. Let's go ahead and sketch it. So on my graph here, I'm just going to make a rough sketch again. So it goes down, it goes up, and it comes back down. Okay, so we get a graph that looks something like that. We know that this is going to be the minimum, and that's going to be the maximum that we're looking for. Okay, so we just follow the same process. Now, step 3, we're going to go second trace, and we're going to use one of these two, whichever one we want to find first. So let's say we start with the maximum again. The second trace, we want number 4 because we're looking for the max. We're going to move that blinking cursor over to the top of the hill. Okay, so you'll notice it's on top of the hill. It wants a left bound, so I go to the left of the hill. And then it says right bound, so I go to the right of the hill. That puts the 2 arrows there, and then I just give it the best guess in between the 2 arrows. And it says that the maximum is at 28. Okay, so my max here would be 28. And then lastly here, if I want to find the minimum, it's just repeating that process. Second trace, but we want minimum. We're going to move to the point. We're going to go to the left of the valley this time. We're going to go to the right of the valley to give the right bound. Those are the 2 arrows, and then we want the best guess in the middle. Calculator thinks about it, and then it says y equals -4. So my minimum value here is going to be -4. Okay. So like I said, there's 4 general steps. You plug in your equation, you click graph, you might need to adjust the windows, then you do second trace, you're looking for min or max depending on what you're looking for. It'll ask you for a left bound, a right bound, and then you give it the best guess. And the y coordinate is your max min of the value.